Dune, Arrakis, Planet Space Cocaine. Welcome back to a new episode of We Care About Things a Normal Amount. This is GJ, and for anyone who is curious about the title of this and why it's a part two, a long story that started in June of last year with a Kickstarter and my pledge of doing a beginner's guide to Dune, and it's up on my personal YouTube channel. And this was before I even contemplated about starting a podcast. And right when I was toying around with the idea of the podcast, one of our patrons actually donated to, let's just say, call it what it is. It was a bribe to encourage me to do a second rant, a sequel rant, if you will. So that is what we are here to do today. I know my sister AB suggested the title Revenge of Moonmouse, but the unofficial title of this is Dune Rant Part 2, Return to Planet Space Cocaine. So, before we go any further, this episode of We Care About Things a Normal Amount is brought to you by our sponsors. Krakenstein's Craptorium, you need crap, we got crap. Little Cats, Little Kates, Living Doll Hospital, Chicken Boo's Costume Emporium, Myth Breeze Emporium of Lost Socks, Transmissions from Smeagol, and Dunfall Industries, along with viewers like you. Thank you. If you would like to become one of our patrons, please do. You'll get early access to all of our episodes, as well as get some sneak peeks of the upcoming episodes. Me and AB are also coming up with some merch, probably some stickers, because of the fact of both of us are suckers for stickers. So stay tuned. Disclaimers. I am by no means a Dune expert. I am just a person who has been around people who love Dune since literally when I was born. My mom read the books as a kid until, and this is her direct quote, until they got weird. As someone who has done extensive research into the Dune books, I have absolutely no idea exactly at what point that quantifies as they got weird. I'm just gonna guess there was either book 3 or 4. Who knows? But yeah, I am not an expert. I am merely someone whose boomer mom thought that her watching David Lynch's Dune at the young age of 6 years old was an appropriate thing for a 6-year-old to watch. Spoiler alert, it was not. I literally cannot be in the room with that movie playing because no, it's not a good time for me. If, however, you would like to listen to people who have read Dune and actually know what they're talking about with this whole thing, I have some suggestions. The first one is Generic Entertainment. He recently did a skit of recommending the Dune books to someone who hasn't read the books before. And it was hilarious, and that actually gave me some inspiration to do this rant. Another person is Alt Shift X. They have multiple videos on their channel about Dune, as well as a full timeline of the original 6 books from Frank Herbert. And last but not least, I highly recommend Quinn's Idea. Quinn Ideas. He is a black sci-fi and fantasy nerd. I've said this in my previous rant, but I'm going to say it again. His love and enthusiasm of the books is so fantastic to watch, especially in a space where black faces and black voices are rarely seen and heard. So I highly recommend watching him. One of my favorite videos from him is him reacting to the teaser for the 2020 Dune movie, and it's like a kid in a candy store. It's fantastic. Also, trigger warnings for the following things: religious oppression, ethnic cleansing, genocide, mental illness in the form of insanity/schizophrenia, and eugenics. While I am recording this in March of 2024, the Palestinian people are still being attacked, as well as the numerous conflicts around the world, including Congo. Those tragedies are still very much happening right now, and I completely understand if in your entertainment you do not want to hear any more of that happening. Even if it is in a fictional world, I completely understand if that's not what you want to watch right now. In fact, if you don't want to hear any of that and you want some suggestions of like lighthearted stuff, go to Vlogbrothers right now, Vlogbrotheer, and watch Hank Green's interview with Flyana Boss. It's about 15 minutes. It's great. It's like watching two kids with their uncle asking him all of the random questions that pops into their head and him actually like giving informed answers. It's infectious, it's bubbly, it's lighthearted. Highly recommend. I also recommend Zay Frank's True Facts About Certain Animals videos, especially the Creepy Dave shorts. It makes more sense when you watch it. Highly recommend those if you're not in for me making jokes about Dune and, quite frankly, this weird and downer of a book, very possibly movie series. Okay? Cool? Cool. Let's start with the non-spoiler stuff. First part, apparently Frank Herbert wrote the second Dune book, Dune Messiah, because people weren't understanding the messages of the first Dune book. Wires were crossed on the messages of religious oppression and don't trust charismatic leaders and all that fun stuff. All people saw was, the typical hero's journey and huzzah, our boy won at the end. And the very common problem of confusing a protagonist as a good guy. That's actually a problem that we're currently having with Dune Part 2. It's very interesting how, despite 60 years difference, we are still having the issue of media literacy, and especially with this one book series. It's hilarious that Denis Villeneuve has fallen into the same trap that Frank Herbert did of having to explain to people that no, that's not what this is about. I just That's great. That's fantastic. Let me phrase that. That's hilarious to me. I'm sure to the people who love Dune and who smelling what Herbert was stepping in, I'm sure that's very frustrating. This is also weeks after the reemergence of the discussion of the Starship Trooper movie and how it's satire, and it's the director punching down on Heinlein because he hates fascists. People not trying to understand that it's a satire. Oh, the interesting times we live in of Twitter and media literacy. It's not fun. Okay. Next thing that I wanted to bring out, a random comment I saw on Generic Entertainment's short video on, recommending Dune to someone. I saw a comment where someone says Dune books 1 and 2 are about politics. Books 3 and 4 are about philosophy, and books 5 and 6 are about weird sex stuff. And as someone who went down the rabbit hole for about 2 hours trying to understand what happens, I can see that. I can see that. I will not be explaining what happens books 4 through 6 of Dune because I don't fully understand it. I did research for this. Not very extensive research, but I did do some. The original OG6 books. And it was like someone trying to explain to you color theory, but in Italian. I understand some of the words that you're saying. At the beginning, I was kind of keeping up, but the further along we got, you have completely lost me, and I'm trying to understand exactly how I got to this point. It. So, yeah, I'll be explaining books 1 through 3 to the best of my abilities, and then give you a sprinkling of what happens in 4 through 6. While you are here, I want to touch on the Sci-Fi Channel. They did two miniseries adaptations of Dune. The first one is just of the first Dune books, and then the second miniseries, Children of Dune, covers Dune Messiah and then the Children of Dune, so books 2 and 3. And the miniseries came out in 2003 and has baby James McAvoy as Paul's son, Leto II. And I mention this because there is a really beautiful story of him getting this role, not just as a young actor, but getting this role as someone who read and enjoyed the Dune books. And at the LA premiere of the movie, he actually ran into the cast from Farscape. He ran into Claudia Black and Ben Crowder. And he said that he got some really encouraging words and advice from them that actually helped him keep going. And that was 21 years ago. And Claudia Black heard about that interview and then gave her own perspective of that experience of someone who was struggling with the studio for Farscape and having undiagnosed ADHD, but being so captivated by not only the movie but of McAvoy's performance, and then happening upon him in like the waiting room and her and Crowder just like kind of hyping him up because he was just so good. It's such a heartwarming story and a great example of you never know how encouraging your words can be to someone at any given time. Very beautiful. With that, we are now going into the spoilers territory. So if you do not want to be spoiled for the Dune books by Frank Herbert and a little bit by Brian Herbert as well, avoid now. Around here, the box, there should be a playlist of the videos that I was talking about. So if you don't want to be spoiled by anything, go watch that. For everybody who is down for the spoilers, let's get started in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so Paul kills a lot of people. Some of it is directly, some of it is indirectly. I didn't know how to start the spoiler section. You would think by recording this 3 times I would have known how to start the spoiler section, but oh well. Let's pick up where we dropped off at, let's say, at the end of Denis Villeneuve's movie. So the ending of Dune is basically Paul extorting the literal galaxy and getting revenge for his father's death. Not just his father's death, because I feel like that's kind of like narrow, but the death of everybody in House Atreides. Remember, it wasn't just Paul and his family who was brought to Arrakis. It was the Mentats, it was the servants, it was the countless soldiers. A large chunk of those people died when the Harkonnens, not changing my pronunciation, when the Harkonnens attacked the house in the middle of the night. So, Paul extorts the galaxy in revenge for their deaths. He tells everybody, hey, I'm actually not dead. Here's my super army behind me. If you don't make me emperor of the entire Landsrad, I will terraform this entire planet, this whole thing, and cut off the spice production, and we will all rot. We will all go back to the 12th century if you don't do what I tell you. And because the whole galaxy runs on this stuff like it's Dunkin' Donuts, they oblige. Paul marries the Emperor's daughter so that it doesn't completely look like a coup, but just like, marriage arrangement. That's not what this is. It was extortion. In the Denis Villeneuve's movie, Princess Irulan, who is also a Bene Gesserit, BT Dubs, she's played by Florence Pugh. And I remember when she got casted for this, and everybody was like, oh my god, Timothée Chalamet, and Florence Pugh, and Zendaya. This is going to be the love triangle of the century. It's not. It is very much not. In the Dune books, I don't even think Paul and Irulan actually even have sex. She eventually becomes like the caretaker of his children, but it's not a love triangle. It is a line with a dot awkwardly next to it. Chani is the only person who has Paul's kids. An important plot point that I skipped over is that there's about 6 years between Paul and Jessica having to run for their lives to the ending of the first Dune book. And in that time, Paul and Chani get married. They have a child. They have a son named Leto after his dad, Leto II. While they're gone for one of their missions, a raid happens on the siege where they left their son, and he is tragically murdered. Now I know what you might be thinking. Wait, GJ, didn't you just tell us that baby James McAvoy plays Leto II? How is he playing Leto II if Leto II died in that raid? That is a great question, listener, and I am so glad that you caught that. Go start to you. Um, The answer to that is that Paul has decision paralysis, and he names his first child Leto II. And then years later, when Chani gives birth to their twins, the daughter is named Ganima. I've heard two different pronunciations. And then the boy they name Leto II. Paul Atreides names 2/3 of his children Leto II. I'm gonna call James McAvoy Leto II. Leto II. Do I have to do this? No, but it makes me happy, and that is a commodity in these times. So, we're gonna put a pin in baby Leto II. He is very important to all of this. We gotta talk about Alia. Lady Jessica is actually Baron Harkonnen's daughter. The Bene Gesserit did this breeding selection thing so that their sisterhood is genetically connected to all the great families in the Landsraad. So it's not too far-fetched that she is eventually related to him, but she is very directly related to him. That is his daughter. This has very big consequences because remember, the Bene Gesserits, after they go through a certain process, they can access their they can access the memories of their ancestors through their maternal side. But the Kwisatz Haderach has the capability of expanding his memory through both his mother and his father's side. So the Baron Harkonnen being in there is not a good thing. That is a very big plot point. So Lady Jessica is pregnant at the end of Dune 2020, and in the book, she eventually becomes like Reverend Mother, and the process to do that is that you have to drink this liquid that is basically like poison condensed. It's poison supercharged, and you drink it and then you have to like make your body combat the poison, and during all of that it will expand your mind, and that's how you can access the memories of your ancestors. And for her as a Reverend Mother, it will actually open up the memories of all the Reverend Mothers before her. That's great. Unfortunately, she is pregnant, and in the process of doing all of this, it also opens up little fetus Alia's memories as well. So she is able to access all of these memories as a little tiny baby. This is screwed up for numerous reasons because this means that Alia is preborn. When you do this process as an adult, the drinking the water of life or whatever it's called, when you do this as an adult, you have full control of your Bene Gesserit powers and you have a personality of your own. When you do this as a baby, you don't have your own personality yet, or at least not one strong enough to combat all of these memories and all of these voices in your head, and eventually it will lead to you becoming what the Bene Gesserit calls an abomination, and one of these personalities will come on top. And it's kind of a coin toss of whether that personality is, for lack of a better phrase, good or evil. And considering the fact that Alia is the granddaughter of Baron Harkonnen, who is very evil, it's not a fun time for anybody. So by the end of like the first Dune book, Alia is like 5 with the wisdom of like a full adult, and it freaks out everybody. Fun fact, in the David Lynch version, it's Alicia Witt. She does a fantastic job. Super weird. And while we're talking about genetic abnormalities, this is probably also the time to talk about Galas. There's listen, for every one name in Dune, there's another name that has multiple pronunciations. Harkonnen, Harkonnen, Aya, Alia, Ganima, Ginema, Ghidorah, I don't know. If I get a name wrong, I don't care. You didn't come here for accuracy. You came for here for rambling. And rambling is what you're gonna get. So, back to what I was saying. So, in the first Dune rant, I mentioned how technology is kind of iffy because they're not allowed to use AI or technology with the intelligence of a human because of the whole Butlerian jihad thing and, killer robots. Most of the galaxy held to that law, except for like these two planets on the edge of the galaxy. One is called, I think, Chapter House, and the other one is Ix. IX. And Ix has been having some fun over there and doing genetic experimentation. I find it hilarious that in the Dune universe, no one has come up with therapy, and yet they came up with genetic experimentations. People's priorities. Never gonna stop being fun. So they create gulas, which are basically clones, but these clones have like the possibility of like potentially accessing the original person's memories. And this becomes a plot point. I'm saying this so many times. There's so many like seedlings in the Dune books that pops up later. It's almost like it's a narrative. Um there are clones, and there's also people I think that can like change their faces and impersonate people, and those are called face dancers. And then in later on in the books, there's like a team of Secret Service people, but they're cat ladies, but not cat men. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure I heard the reasoning. It went over my head. Let's go with book two. Book two. It's about 12 years after the first Dune book, and the galaxy is going through a rough time right now. After Paul rose to power, the Fremen decided that they were gonna do a religious cleansing, but not just on Arrakis, they did it throughout the galaxy. And so by the second book, it's been like 12 years, and about 61 billion people are dead. It's affected the entire galaxy except for the Atreides' home planet, Caladan. Paul has a lot on his plate right now. Chani is trying to have another kid after their first one died. That's not happening. Spoiler alert, it's because Irulan has been feeding her contraceptives without her knowledge. Hilarious that we got contraception, but we don't have therapy. Okay, we have Paul dealing with the death of 61 billion people on his conscience. Now, in the first book, Paul also takes the psychedelic, the water of light, and that expands his consciousness. So not only does he have the memories of his ancestors, with him being a mentat, it also helps him see the full scope of what the future can be. And so Paul sees the multiple paths that humanity can go on, that he could choose, and allegedly he chose the one with the least amount of death on it. That's what he personally says, but considering the fact that none of us can see it, we're kind of going on a just trust me, bro, it was really bad excuse, and I'm not sure if that's really strong enough. So Paul has not only the weight of the choices that he made on his conscience, but he has the choices that he has to make weighing on him as well. He also has people trying to overthrow him because they're still kind of mad about, the coup that happened 12 years ago. Alya's being weird. No one really understands why Alya's being weird, but Alya's being weirder than usual. And then Duncan comes back. That happens a lot. Just keep expecting Duncan to come back. Duncan is the cockroach that survives the nuclear apocalypse. He's just going to keep on popping up because they cloned Duncan. I think they cloned Duncan to screw with his consciousness and to try to like get him to remember like, oh yeah, you used to be a good person and now you're a evil dictator. I don't know why. I just know that Duncan is back. A lot of things happens in this book. Chani has the twins. The twins are both preborn. Uh-oh. Arya tries to overthrow him. Duncan doesn't remember him until he does. Oh no, my best friend, I tried to murder him. Paul becomes blind. People are doubting his right to rule. And so by the end of the book, Leto the second and Ganima help Paul kind of prove that he is supposed to, be the one in charge, even though they're babies. Paul proves that he does in fact have the right to rule, and then Paul Atreides does the one act of self-care that he does for himself in the entire series and wanders off into the desert, blind, because one of the assassination attacks, blinded him. But he walks off into the desert, everybody thinks that he's dead. So Paul goes missing. Alia is temporarily in charge of Arrakis because the twins aren't old enough yet, and the Baron Harkonnen, or his memory, further takes over Alia's brain. That is Dune Messiah. Children of Dune. This is about another 6 years later, and the twins are a bit older. Leto the second is kind of hearing the siren call of his ancestor, but mostly in that he wants to get high in the desert like his dad and his grandma did and try to figure out why his dad left and what did he see. I know that he got scared, but I don't feel like I would get scared because I'm built different. And so the twins, they're about teenagers at this point. There's an assassination attack on the twins. Duncan takes them into the desert, and oh, by the way, the whole thing of them being preborn, remember they're preborn. Ganima apparently hypnotizes herself, so she's fixed. Later the second leans into it and gets high in the desert, gets all his stuff expanded, sees the multiple paths that his dad saw, and was like, oh, I see it. This is the best path for humanity to take in the long run. This is the golden path. This is what my father saw that terrified him and that made him, give up on everything. Well, he's a coward. I'm built different. Let's go. And so the first step is the first step, of course, is for him to make himself one of the sandworms on the planet. And so, he gets their, little parasites that eat the sandworm. And so, he attaches them to himself to slowly, become a sandworm. And I realized that this sounds unhinged, but it does work. So, trust the process. Meanwhile, Aya is doing her thing. There's this blind prophet talking about, oh, everybody, the Moabdid was a crackpot and he was evil. Choose your own path, everybody, and don't listen. These higher ups, they're out to get you. Spoiler alert, it's Paul. There's a really beautiful scene in Children of Dune where Leto the second and Paul talk to each other, and both actors are doing a really good job of showing the responsibility of this and how very probably how Leto is a bit arrogant with, oh, I can handle this, I can do this, versus Paul being like, no, I know what this costs. I have already given so much. You don't have to do this. And I watched this scene right before I recorded this. And I was like, oh yeah, look at them. Wow, baby James McAvoy is doing a great job. Wait, wasn't this guy American in the first miniseries? Because it's the same actor playing Paul in both. And so I rewatched the fight scene between him and Gurney from the first miniseries, and he is American. He has an American accent. But 20 plus years in the desert and a disability, and this man is now British. Choices were made. Anyway, the book ends with Arya's death, Paul's death, and Leto the second saying, I run this now, I'm totes responsible, and I am the true monarch, and I will show all of you that I am the true monarch by marrying my sister, because that's what we do. Don't worry, they don't actually have kids together. She has her own royal consort that she can procreate with, and Leto the second never procreates with anyone, and then slowly becomes a worm human. He becomes the god emperor of Dune, and then lives to oppress the galaxy for 3,000 years as a worm man. Um, and this here is where I will leave the coherent part of my Dune ramblings, because the books just keep doing further and further time jumps. Like the next book is like book four is like 3,000 years into it, and more eugenics has happened, because the whole point of like his goal was for the Atreides genetics to go through the galaxy, and through that, people who have omniscience can't see the Atreides for some reason. They got that John Cena genetics, and that helps because there's enough people in the galaxy where we can't predict movements, and humanity is truly free. Later, the second eugenics so hard that the galaxy will prosper. Give him a trophy, I guess. Duncan keeps coming back. By like book four, Duncan has come back like a couple of dozen times, and he keeps being murdered. It doesn't stop. Then book five happens, and it's another 4,000 years, and there's more people with the John Cena Atreides genetics, and there's an evil group of Bene Gesserit who like have sex powers that's trying to like subjugate people and trying to like overthrow the OG Bene Gesserits. And Duncan comes back again. By this time, he has come back a couple of hundred times, but this time he's supercharged because he has the memory of all the past Duncans, and then he gets sex powers. And at one point, him and one of the sexy Bene Gesserit have a what I can describe PG way to have a duel, and he wins. And then the next book, this he they get us they save a sandworm. I think somewhere in the middle of all this, Arrakis blows up. I think it's book five. And then somewhere in between, like later the second kind of being a sandworm to him fully being a sandworm, the other sandworms of Arrakis dies, but when he dies, the sandworms come back and they have little essences of Leto the second in them, and then to stop the sandworms from having essence, the Leto the second, someone blows up Arrakis, but they saved one sandworm. And so the series ends with Duncan, because it's always Duncan along with like some other people, a sandworm, and some Jews on the plane trying to fly their way to salvation. I'm not kidding with the Jews. That's not me trying to be facetious or anything, or just like, oh, it's a metaphor the same way the Fremen are metaphor for Arab people. No, it's Jews. I don't know ethically what jokes I can make about that, so I'm just gonna say Jews in space. And that's how Herbert's Dune series ends. Now, he was writing one last book to kind of explain, what was the great evil that Leto the second was worried about, the sandworms, and who are these two weird people, Daniel and Margie, that they see in the book series, but unfortunately Herbert died before he could write that last book. His son, Brian, allegedly found notes from his father detailing that last book, and he decided that he was going to write that along with another sci-fi writer, Kevin J. Anderson. I cannot personally attest to the quality of these books. I know in the fandom it's kind of like love them or hate them, but there's been like 20 extra books since then, and plus a graphic novel. I heard that I heard Brian and Kevin did the same thing that Marvel did in the 90s of just like, oh, we brought back clones, then everybody gets a clone. Clones everywhere. And in one of the books, they find a clone of baby Leto the second. And I only bring that up because of the fact that this means that in the Dune universe, there's a Leto the third, which honestly makes all of the research I did for this completely worth it for that one joke. There's a Leto the second, the third. So, that so this has been Dune Rant Part 2. I don't know how to end this, so I'm just gonna end it with that. Thank you for listening to Dune Rant Part 2. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understood parts of this, and that this has made you curious enough to look into these books yourselves. Like I said, I've never read the books. I have numerous friends who have read them. I never have. I never will. Pretty sure I'm gonna see Part 2 by Villeneuve. I'm not doing it anytime soon. I might do one last Dune rant to talk about the adaptations themselves because I've talked only really about the books and referenced the movies. I have not talked about the movies themselves. I haven't talked about Sting in his metal space bikini. I haven't talked about the budget of $3 that Sci Fi Channel gave to the Dune movie. I might do one last one so I could talk about the adaptations themselves. I'm not sure. Let me know. Once again, thank you for listening. And a brief shout out to our patrons Crackestein's Craptorium, Little Cat's Living Doll Hospital, Chicken Boo's Costume Emporium, Mythbree's Emporium of Lost Socks, Transmissions from Smeagol, Dunfall Industries, and our other patrons and viewers like you. Please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Or don't. I'm not your dad. And I hope all of you have a good rest of your day. Bye.